Well, thank you everybody for coming to my session, Azure Government Security and Differentiation. I am Matt Rathbun. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for Azure Government. So about the first half of the presentation is really going to be talking about things that are unique from a security or compliance perspective about Azure Government, reasons why you might select Azure Government from either of those paradigms. The second half of the presentation is leaning a little bit more forward into our security philosophy, tools, approaches, things that we do for our back end, things that are coming very soon for you in the future, in ways that we're actually trying to change the overall cybersecurity landscape using the power of the cloud and the inflection point that we have here. Also, while I do have a full slide deck, I'm happy if we don't get to most of it. I'd like to have conversation and interaction as much as possible. So please feel free to ask questions. Also, I can't see any of you because of the stage lights. So just feel free to, in addition to raise your hand, shout out if it doesn't seem like I'm catching you. I'm fine with being interrupted. It's more fun for me when it's a conversation. But getting started in general, so what is Azure Government? Why might I select Azure Government over other offerings and capabilities? It is a combination, really it's identity management, cloud infrastructure, and some pretty advanced workflows. We saw in the last session a lot of platform as a service capabilities, or cognitive services capabilities, all sorts of really interesting things that you can do that go above and beyond just data center and the cloud kind of infrastructure capabilities. But more than that, it has some unique activities around who can manage it. So first of all, it's located solely in the United States. It is a cloud that is restricted only to government entities or to partners who are working on behalf of government entities. It is managed exclusively by US citizens. So they are screened and they must be citizens of the United States. We don't even do a US person sort of clause, which you can get away with in an ITAR sort of world. Anybody who has access to production is a citizen. And it is, like I mentioned, it is for the government only. So you have to be a first-party government entity, or you have to be able to prove that you are working on behalf of a first-party government entity or have access to restricted data. So if you are, for example, a defense contractor and you have a signed ITAR letter from the Secretary or from the Department of State about not being able to do export of certain things that you work on, then yes, you can come into this environment. But we don't want commercial entities. We don't want Pepsi and Coke in here unless all of a sudden there's some sort of secret energy drink I'm unaware of. Then they can bring that data in and that's fine. Reasons why you might choose Azure Government over other offerings. The first one is exclusivity. So this is really important for us. We think it's important to maintain a community of like-minded or like-required set of instruments. Not all of our competitors see that the same way, that if you look at their government entity, you will actually, if you can afford to pay their upcharge, they will allow anyone who wants to come into that space. We really do restrict and guarantee there's a very formal and rigorous eligibility process you must go through to become a customer of Azure Government. If you're interested in checking to see whether or not you can do that yourself, you can actually sign up for an Azure Government trial. So you can sign up for a free trial. That free trial puts you through the eligibility process so we can determine whether or not your data and your organization qualifies to be inside of our space. We have more reach from a governmental cloud perspective than any of our other competitors. We're the most certified cloud on the planet, so from a trust perspective. And then really hybrid flexibility. We're the only hyperscale provider that's making a significant investment in the hybrid capability, so making things work both on-prem and in the cloud, and then also with other clouds. And then flexible, meaning we don't have a one-size-fits-all solution. As Zach mentioned last time, this is not Microsoft from 10 years ago. We don't expect you to use only our products. We use open source and open standards wherever possible so that you can leverage our tools and techniques in multiple different instantiations. You can run things like Linux in our cloud. 33% of my global workloads run Linux today. As a little bit of proof, you may not notice, but I'm presenting off of Macintosh. This is not a Microsoft of the old where you have to use Microsoft products. We want to enable an ecosystem that allows you to use whatever is necessary for your application, however that may be, wherever it may sit, and really moving and taking power of the cloud. Talked about exclusive to the Azure Government or exclusive to our government customers. The easiest way to check that is to do the trial. And if you've seen some of our other presentations, you will have seen some of this already. This is our existing footprint for our government capabilities, both in Azure and Office. You can see we currently have 2 regions. Regions are large data center campuses. It means really they're effectively multiple what you would think of data centers in each of these regions. They're all within 10 miles of each other at the largest radius because we want to deal with transactional speeds. And speed of light becomes a problem once you go beyond 10 miles. So everything's closer than that. But otherwise, they're very, very large infrastructure campuses where we guarantee things like 3 writes within a location. We can do high availability configuration so that you can be on multiple co-location centers, multiple potential buildings, different power sources, so that a fire in a single location won't take out all your access. And then in addition to that, you have geo-replication capabilities. So right now we have 2 Azure data centers, government data centers online. We have 3 for Office 365. They're all separated by at least 500 miles. So you can guarantee that civil unrest or a natural disaster or something else that might take out somehow one of my entire campuses won't take out the whole cloud infrastructure. We have the ability to connect into those resources and infrastructures directly, meaning you do not have to come through the public internet. You do not have to transit the public internet. These are all meet-me points where you can drop directly on Microsoft's dark fiber network. We own 1.8 million miles of dark fiber worldwide that we use just to connect our own infrastructure together. We do that for a few reasons. One, we can sort of guarantee really low latency between our data centers because we control the path. We want to remove as much speed of light problem as we can from the existing infrastructure and capabilities. The other thing is we just want to make sure that there's a lot of customers we have who are concerned about either trust of the internet or really, I have a lot of military customers. What happens in a cyber event if the internet is not available or is not trustworthy at all? So we enabled architecture that you can actually cut off capability from the internet. If the internet were to go away, Azure, our cloud, does not go away. And you still have the capability to maintain those mission critical workloads through these direct sort of connections. We have new data centers coming online here in the very near future. So we are further expanding that geo-replication promise. They are going to be in private preview here, in the next few months, and then coming generally available at the middle of the year so that you will be able to put your location, your data center, or your replication application into those spaces, both from a geo-redundancy backup DR kind of standpoint, but also if you want to do some software load balancing. If you have an application where you want to be able to really just do active all over the place, and you want to be able to tie that connection into that architecture wherever the user is closest, you'll be able to do that. So you can have, for example, stand up in Phoenix and in Virginia and spread your load across the country based upon where your users are likely to be coming from. And then we're seeing at the same time when we bring on those Phoenix and San Antonio new data centers, we'll be adding more ExpressRoute infrastructure to that location. The other thing that's really great about ExpressRoute is not only is it a direct connection, it's an incredibly high-speed connection. It's up to 10 gigabits bonded pairs. You can burst that bonded pair up above 10 together using that, but we always do the pair so that we can guarantee that if one goes down, you still don't lose your whole connection. And those are available through carrier-neutral third-party sites. So you can do meet-me points where you're able to access based upon whichever service provider you like, but you can drop your own MPLS network or whatever architecture you want at any of those sites directly onto our network, making it easier to get your users connected into our infrastructure and removing that risk of going through the public internet. And then finally, if you are a defense contractor, we have CAP location points. So if you have to go through the cloud access point, we're also helping negotiate and in conversations with the government about trying to understand, or with the DoD about some challenges that have happened with the CAP. So hopefully coming soon we'll have some interesting announcements along those lines. But we've been partnered with DISA since the very beginning on this process and are making a lot of progress from that perspective. I mentioned that we are the most trusted cloud on the planet. What that means is that we currently have 53 regimes that have signed off on the security of our infrastructure around the world. So we have independent third parties coming in to do assessments. The most critical ones here in the United States, we have FedRAMP moderate and high on our government infrastructure, DISA L2, L4, and L5 on a couple of dedicated DoD-specific regions where we do physical isolation to DoD first party only in both Virginia and Iowa. So that same idea that our regions are multi-data center campuses, that means that there are dedicated infrastructure stacks within that is for the DoD only in both of those locations. That's how we get the physical isolation requirements of level 5. 87171, so if you are a defense contractor and you have to meet those requirements, we support and have that capability and against all of those large infrastructures. The next thing that's important though is it's not just that we have all those certifications, that we have all those shields. It's also that we have more services covered under each one of those. So if you were to, for example, compare my next largest competitor, they have 9 or 10 total services that are available in any sort of their governmental level of packages. And if you actually look at their government regions and there are things for the military allowed, they're down to 6. So 6 versus 32 is what we're currently available. There are 37 services actually deployed in Azure Government. We have on the roadmap those 39 services. We have on the roadmap those additional 7 services will be in our scope by the end of June. So we have worked really, really hard with our regulators. We actually developed a process that they're going to be publishing to be used by all cloud providers that moved us from an average of 18 months to add a new service or feature down to 60 days. So the moment Zach gives me a service in Azure Government, I start my clock, I have 60 days, and I can actually get it entirely through my internal review processes and the FedRAMP review processes, and soon to be the DISA review processes through reciprocity for all of that environment capability so that you'll be able to light it up. We want to make sure that our most important services are available to our government customers as soon as possible. What's interesting about this is, although we have more total customer-facing services in our commercial environment, we have far more services certified in our government environment because we have those higher stringent requirements around citizenship and other security concerns. While the code is the same running in both places, our process for maintaining them is a little different. We've made our compliance effort focused on our government environment. So you have 12 services currently in public, but you have 32 services in government. It'll be 39 within the next few months. Then to make it easy for you all to be able to take advantage of that, we developed a program specifically to help customers who build on top of our architecture achieve compliance or achieve security goals. We don't want you to have to figure this out on your own. We have spent north of $100 million when we're working with our own internal consultants and auditors just on consulting and auditing fees to get those 53 regimes. We don't expect any of our customers, especially our government customers, who are spending tax dollars to have to spend in that same sort of region. We want to make this easier and more applicable for you. So we have a 5-pillar program that really helps achieve that goal. A little more detail on how some of that works. So we have deployed architecture. So you can actually go look at, through government document sites, our Trust Center, how the architecture of each of our services is designed. So you can perform a risk analysis as to whether or not it's going to meet your obligations and requirements. We also do publish a services list, so you can see exactly where each of those services are against our various security regimes. So if you need both FedRAMP and PCI, what services are available? How can you mix and match those capabilities? If there are services not on that list, but you need them, then we can do an NDA-based conversation to let you know whether or not that is on our roadmap and roughly when we think something like that might be coming into approach. We are working on building out a catalog of automated deployment templates. So version 1 of that is that 3-tier architecture. If anybody caught the last session, they talked about a basic 3-tier architecture. Instead of having to build that yourself, we're going to have pre-built templates that are already built to meet the standards of these regimes. You one-button click and it sets it out for you. It creates that 3-tier architecture. That's version 1. It's very similar to what our competition has in place at the moment. Next level up, coming in the very near future, probably middle of the year time frame, is then taking that idea of PowerShell scripting and JSON extensions to say, okay, well, we've deployed an architecture, it already meets basic requirements, but let's do some more detailed, more fine-grained deployment. So I get that antivirus deployed exactly right, that I'm enforcing password requirements, all of that. So the goal is that we're being able to take over as much as we want, or as much as we can of the security responsibility from you, or make it easy so it's just a menu of one-button clicks that you can select, make that compliance move out of your way. The next tier is pre-built certification documentation. So we have that against all of these government entities you might be interested in: FedRAMP, Moderate, High, DISA L2, L4, and L5. Where this is not my documentation, this is not the 4,000 pages that I submit to the government to show that Azure Government is actually secure. We've taken that and rewritten it so that we have a 1,000-page SSP template where a large percentage of that is already filled out for you. Depending upon whether or not you architect as IaaS or PaaS, we have already said that Microsoft owns this security responsibility, and here's what we do on your behalf. This is what you are getting automatically from Azure. We then socialize with those regulators, meaning FedRAMP JAB has already approved our FedRAMP templates. The DISA PMO has already approved our DISA templates. If you use them, they do not look at all that information that we filled out for you. They restrict their review to just the specific set that you own. That also means if you have a 3PAO, an auditor who has to look at it, they only have to look at the restricted set that's unique to you. Now, level 3 of this next documentation, this maturity that we're building out here, is we're going to start tying those automatic deployments and certification things back together. Right now, for the places where you still have responsibility in that security documentation, we don't just say this is your responsibility and walk away. We give you examples of what a passing answer will look like against that structure. We give you examples of what good architecture would look like in that scenario. And wherever there's possible, we provide you links to Microsoft technology, Technara articles, examples of what might satisfy this requirement or how you could build it out. We're going to start pointing those then back to the ARM templates as we build out that library to say, actually just go deploy this ARM template and it will satisfy this control for you. And then the really high level state is when you click that ARM template, not only is it going to deploy it, not only is it going to configure it using PowerShell, it's then going to use YAML to go back and write into that documentation for you what it did so that you don't have to document even that. The goal is we're going to get as close to 0% responsibility for you as possible, right? We do not want this to be ever an impediment. In fact, the message of my team is not that we're supposed to build the most secure and compliant cloud. It's that our customers' use of our cloud should be the most secure and compliant clouds on the planet. There's no point in me building security if you can't consume it. There's no point in me getting compliant certifications if you can't consume it and consume it easily. We're making all that available. And then finally, we have two flavors of expertise that we make available. If you are a commercial provider, so not a government entity because your budgets are more difficult to deal with, but if you're a commercial provider and you want to get a certification built on top of Azure and you don't have your own internal consultants that you already like, you can get access to our consultants. We have a stable of those who know our architecture well, and you get them at discounted rates. If we send you to them through the Blueprint program, or vice versa, them to you through the Blueprint program, they have guaranteed that they will only charge you what they charge Microsoft. Now, with some of these organizations, I'm spending millions of dollars a year. I get a large volume discount. They consider you part of that overall Microsoft infrastructure, Microsoft capability, so you get my rates, not what they would normally charge you. Even if you just want to spend $20,000 to $30,000 this year, you're going to get a lot more value out of that than you normally would. The other thing that you get access to is my staff. So me and my individuals who run our Blueprint program are available to do security architecture reviews for you if you're stuck, you can't figure out how to particularly meet a given requirement or goal or setup against any of the regimes that we currently have in place. We can review that for you. We will also, if you're getting stuck with either your internal IA individuals inside of a federal agency, or you're stuck with the DISA PMO or the FedRAMP JAB, we will come along with you to your meetings and explain to those organizations why what you've done is exactly like what they've already approved for us, and leverage the political capital we gained by getting through their processes the hard way, the brute force way, to streamline that for you. Now, we've tested this in several federal agencies at this point, and we're seeing roughly a 50% decrease in time from dev to production through the certification, above and beyond what a normal federal agency does for their own in-house build. This isn't cloud complicated. This is, I'm showing a 50% decrease in time for just a basic app that they would run in their own infrastructure normally. And then we're seeing if you have to go all the way through getting a FedRAMP certification, you need the JAB to sign off on your architecture, up to a 73% reduction in cost using all of these elements and productions. And we're doing this in several different verticals against many different frameworks and certification standards. We're replicating all of this out across our overall infrastructure and capability. The goal here is certification, compliance, security should never be impediments to you. In fact, we think, and we'll get to this in the second half of the presentation, the number one reason you should move to the cloud is security. And if I want to get you into that environment because it's more secure, then let me solve the compliance issue for you so that it's also easier to move in that direction. The last piece is our hybrid story. And the biggest or most effective tool for our overall hybrid capability is our Operations and Management Suite, OMS. So the Microsoft Operation and Management Suite. It also gets us security capabilities. This is effectively a single pane of glass through which I can manage infrastructure no matter where it sits. I can manage it in my on-prem environment. I can manage it in other clouds, so long as those other clouds allow me to install the agents and I can talk back to Azure through ExpressRoute or through the public internet. Or I can manage resources in Azure. I don't have to think about them as different things. It also allows me to do things like I have a traditional application. I came out of the financial industry a very long time ago. We have a bunch of old architecture that was written long before claims-based auth exist. It will be almost impossible to migrate that stuff. It'll have to be rewritten. Instead, Server 2016 running on premises is cloud aware. It knows of Azure. You can use the automation service here in Server 2016 to run an application, one of these old applications on-prem. And that server runs out of resources. It doesn't have any more storage. It needs more processing power, more memory. Instead of reaching out and trying to balance on-prem, you can have it reach out and balance into the cloud. So you have old architecture that normally could not run in the cloud. You're still running it in a very limited footprint on premises, but have the capability as needed to spin up additional resources in the cloud or automatically write storage to cloud using those automation and backup features. I can, even if I just want to test the waters, I just want to dip my toe in, I'm going to cancel my Iron Mountain contract, I'm going to do live data replication. You can do that very easily using our backup services through OMS. So I can run an entirely on-premises infrastructure. You have an existing data center and you just want to migrate that over and you want to be able to, or back up the important things. You can do all of that through the cloud and through these on-prem hybrid capabilities. And then finally, you get a all-up view of security and health analytics. So I'm getting security monitoring, telemetry, configuration problems against my entire fleet, no matter where it happens to be sitting. And then I can also use the log analytics engine to start doing searches and doing really sort of big data analytics against log data that's coming through my OMS suite. So let's say, for example, we identify a new 0-day that comes out, and there's a signature that we can identify that, hey, if this particular host or this particular process has ever been run, we know that that's a problem. I can actually then go back and look through my log data using log analytics to look for those signatures and find out, did this ever appear on any part of my fleet, no matter where that exists around the world. So just an example of what that console looks like. You can see we have assets, we have servers set up worldwide. They're in places where we don't have data centers in some of the locations. Give an example of what that would look like. I can get security analytics back against it. And the other thing is this isn't just a SIEM where I'm seeing stuff. I can actually click through that, and that enables me to then start doing configuration management. I can just do a couple more clicks and actually fix things on the fly in the cloud. We're taking care of a lot of that telemetry and threat and concern for you. The next half now, or slightly more than half, is transitioning into our security philosophy. Before we do that, are there any outstanding questions on those core pillars, our capabilities, what we're offering in Azure Government, and what we think makes Azure Government different than similar offerings out there on the market?
I was hoping you could speak to at some point differences between Azure Government and Azure non-government. Government agencies still use non-government, but it's considered like a different risk level.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So the question is, what's the difference between Azure Government and Azure non-government? And what does that mean for government entities or consumption? So our non-government, or what we call Azure Commercial, is actually a worldwide instantiation of Azure. It's 38 regions around the planet currently that we instantiate that. Now you can pin your subscription to stay just in the US and make sure all of your data stays in the US, so there's not a data sovereignty concern for US government entities. You can stay local, and that's true actually for any of our regions. You can do that in Canada, you want to stay in Canada, you want to do that in the UK, you can do that, Australia. That's all our global infrastructure. From a US government perspective, we have a couple of differences. We only have FedRAMP moderate on that environment, whereas we have FedRAMP high and DISA L4, L5 on our government environment. We only make our CJIS and ITAR promises in our government environment. We don't make those against our commercial infrastructure because we can't guarantee only US citizens. So there will be non-US citizens who have access to production environments in our global fleet because that's a globally managed service overall. Now, the code is all the same. The services function exactly the same. So even let's say I'm a state government, right? And I'm concerned about where I want to be. And I noticed that over here in Azure Government, we've certified a service. Like let's say HD Insights is on my roadmap. It's going to be certified here very soon. It's currently submitted to the government. We're going to get that certified. You believe that that means that, okay, we're doing security well, that's trustworthy, but you actually want to run it over in commercial for some reason. The service runs the same way, right? So the only difference is I'm only doing the compliance uplift, the cost, that portion of the $100 million I have to spend to maintain all of that in the government environment. The tech is actually the same. The biggest difference is that you can actually run all those global workloads really globally. So if you did have customers who, for whatever reason, wanted to have user assets in Canada or China or Europe, and they wanted to be able to connect them more quickly, you can do that in the global environment. That's going to be much more difficult in the government environment. If you didn't qualify, like you were sort of a quasi-government entity like an EDU that may or may not qualify for our government eligibility, but they still want those same kind of protections, you can make some assumptions based upon what we've done in the gov that is all still true in the commercial environment, but we don't take the time to get them independently certified in the way that we do. Did that answer the question, or does that make sense? Okay, great. I saw another question in the back.
Will there be an L4 option for under 500 government contractors this calendar year?
So this is where I get to say I'm only responsible for security of the platform. I have nothing to do with how you buy it. So I do not know the answer to that question. And if anybody asks, I'm also not a lawyer. So any law questions, I'm gonna punt those as well. We can find out for you. We'll have the contract team, but I don't happen to know. There's another question.
So 2 questions.
Yep.
Where are you in getting impact level 6?
Okay.
And in terms of ExpressRoute, you mentioned that that's dark fiber network. I was under the impression that that went to public internet. Can you expand on that and how it works?
Sure. So first, I will plug another session that's coming up tomorrow. There's a whole hour on exactly how ExpressRoute works. Effectively, ExpressRoute is a private connection. So we go through carrier-neutral meet-me points like Equinix facilities. We have connected our dark fiber network to that facility. You can connect directly to us in that location through whatever network you want to connect. There is no public internet in between. So it definitely does not go through the public internet. The L6 question is not something I can answer in this forum.
Is there a concept of like a Windows 10 desktop as a service? I know right now there's like VDI type options where you can do it, but there's a competitor out there that has something called Workspaces that I really wish we had the same thing in Azure. Any plans for having a desktop as a service on Azure?
Got it. So the question is, any plans on having a desktop as a service? The honest answer is we started down that path, and we decided this is one of the things where it's better for us to partner than to. We don't want to try to make everything ourselves, right? Do everything ourselves. I get the same question about, are you ever going to do a medical records database or a document repository? There's some things that are just not our core competency, and even though you would think Windows is, virtual Windows 10 is not. We decided instead to just partner with Citrix. It is our most commonly downloaded workflow. Now, does that mean, with the right business case and a different engineer, we might not do it in the future? Sure. But as far as I know, there's nothing on the roadmap at the time being. Another question in the back.
Do you have on the roadmap any workloads for like dev tests, so lower cost workloads for non-production in government? We're doing that on the commercial side now.
Okay, so the question is, do we have any questions about lower cost workloads for dev tests? You can absolutely do dev test in the government. In terms of costing, again, this is where I have nothing to do with how we buy it. I don't know. Yeah. I thought I saw another hand or two. Anybody else? Okay, yes.
Security documentation, it's only available for the Gov Cloud, or because if it is a low impact system, we might be on commercial cloud.
Right, okay.
Can we extract that?
Sure. So the question is the security documentation only available for the government cloud or is available for the commercial cloud as well? Our FedRAMP documentation is available for the commercial cloud as well. There is Blueprint documentation for that, only for the services that are included in that scope, and it's a relatively small scope. You could infer from our other documentation that sort of stuff, but our goal is, we really think that government customers should be using this government community cloud that we've constructed for them, that there's lots of good reasons why that's a better solution for government. So we're not putting as much effort into trying to provide other services on the commercial. But you can make some inferences based upon what we have done in the government because the code that runs between them is exactly the same. Another question. I believe so. I know the recording. I don't know exactly how that works. I'll check back and we can meet up after. If you grab me at the ask. This is so hard to say. Ask the experts session later today. We can talk about that. Okay. One more. Yeah.
Yes. You said 60 days.
Yeah.
To getting things with FedRAMP.
Yes.
You said a year and a half for some solutions.
Yep.
I mean, how does it really compare against your chief competitor, AWS?
Sure. So the reason why. So the question is, We went from a year and a half to 60 days. How does that differentiate us against the other competitors, and why then? The reason why it used to be a year and a half is you would always add them as an annual assessment. And the government actually only has so much appetite for taking new. So even if I wanted to do a 6-month cadence, FedRAMP won't accept it because they don't have the capacity to take it. So we sort of solved a problem for them. We said, look, you need new features, you need an agile way, and effectively and Blueprint also started this way, is we have people who want to build SaaSes on us. You don't have the capacity to do a full assessment. How can you do a partial assessment? We started it as a partnership with FedRAMP. We built it together with FedRAMP, and then we've just evolved it and taken it in a much bigger space. We did the same thing where we're doing a partnership with them for our agile onboarding of new services, because what would really happen is 18 months, so I deploy a service. Now it has to magically hit my annual window, so we're getting a 6-month lag there. I hit my annual window, but really, let's say I just submitted paperwork to the government March 1st. Now, this is their new accelerated plan, so hopefully I'll get it back this year. Previously, I would submit paperwork. I would maybe get it back in 9 months, more like 12 months, sometimes 18 months, before we got an answer back on so we would actually lose 6 months of time potentially any given year. What we have done is we've changed things around where we say, we do security the same way every time. Right? My method of access control, my method of monitoring, my method of BCR, it's the same for all of my services. I don't do snowflakes. As much as possible, I don't do snowflakes. We have a couple of weird things, and then we force them into the traditional pipeline. Everything else, we do it standard. And unfortunately, the snowflakes, they just have 1 or 2 things that are different. Everything else is the same. So we have our external auditor come out and certify the way that we do things. We certify that approach, and then I submit to both my external auditor and the government evidence that this new service is plugged into all those approaches. I give them the same sort of calls that they would normally pull out to see, yes, HD Insights is following our formal access control process, is following our formal monitoring process. Everything else that we do that actually covers all of our FedRAMP obligations. It's about 20 independent checks that we put every new service through. It's the kind of thing that I do before I submit something in an audit in the first place, because I don't want to fail an audit ever. We just operationalize that and we hand it to them faster. So I'm essentially giving them my internal homework through a very rigorous process. It's about a 25-page SOP where what we're really doing is saying this service is not a significant change. We are demonstrating that it is not a significant change by providing all this evidence and having an attestation by our 3PAO. That's how we get to 60 days. Now that process we developed with them. They are publishing this month or next month, they keep slipping their deadline, a formal process that any cloud provider can use. So we developed something that is vendor neutral. Anybody can use the same process.
So like because it's not a significant change, you don't have to do a full SA.
Exactly. Yeah, so the question is, because it's not a significant change, we don't have to do a full security assessment. That is correct. Because I'm showing that this is actually it's more like it's more like change management than it is like building a new significant thing. Because I'm managing it all the same way, then I'm able to move it in an agile way, move it in quickly. Yep, absolutely. All right, so let's move on to security philosophy. I hinted about this earlier. Most customers who came through us early, the early adopters, were for one of these top 3 reasons, right? They wanted to do digital transformation to make themselves different in their market. They just wanted agility. Dev test is a great agility question. I want to be able to just spin up and spin down and play, and I want to see, well, what happens if I plug an F5 versus a Barracuda in here? How does that affect my application or change? You can do that all very easily. Or maybe I have demand cycles that are uneven, and I want to be able to do spin up, spin down as necessary. Or we had customers who were just at the end of a depreciation cycle, and they didn't want to make another 5 to 7 year investment. They wanted to make a 1-year investment, and they moved and did a big lift and shift. We think, though, the actual #1 reason you should move to the cloud, and Gartner says by 2018 the #1 reason anyone will be moving to the cloud is security. There are things that all of the hyperscale providers are capable of doing that radically exceed what's possible on premises because of the infrastructure and investment we've had to make these global fleets and national sovereign clouds work in any sort of sensible way. But on top of that, it's really that we have now the dollars and the expertise and the consolidation of talent to make big changes. And we're really kind of getting pretty far ahead of the curve and making significant security updates. We're using the fact that cloud is an inflection point to change how we approach not just basic technology, but security. So when you're moving into the cloud, your biggest challenge should be don't do what you've always done. Use this as an opportunity to think about how to do things in a new way. There's lots of capability there, and we'll dive into some of those. One of the things that we've done and are working on doing is radically changing how you control access for users. So when we started this cloud orchestration, it was just like the basic things that you would do today or everybody's done for the last 20 years for access control, which was immensely painful. There's no way we can manage millions of hosts around the world with admins logging in. So we looked into a couple of things. How do we automate that? And then also, how do we restrict access, right? Because we want to get a lot more fine-grained. So middle piece of this story here, the way that we restrict access, what's available today, both in the cloud and on-prem and for you as a customer, is what we call just-in-time access. We've been running it internally for a few years. None of my admins have any privileges. They can't do anything at all by default. They must sign into the just-in-time system and request access. In Azure, it's called just-in-time. In Office, it's called Lockbox. So by default, I can't do anything. I want to perform an action. We make a call as to whether or not that action is allowed for automatic elevation. So I think that this is non-sensitive. You can just go ahead and do it. Or I want a second set of eyes to say yes. So if it is something that we consider to be privileged, anything that potentially exposes customer data in our world is privileged. Then we say, actually, we want a second set of eyes to say yes. To do that, in Azure, it is your DevOps manager or it's an on-call member of your team if it's after hours. In Office, you can actually, if you have the right license, make yourself the second key. So if you think about submarine movies, it takes 2 keys to launch the missiles. I came out of the financial world. I only ever had half the combination to the safe. I am still not sure to this day why they gave the IT guy any part of the combination to the safe, but I can only have half of it. I can't get to the money by myself. Same idea. I do not want my admins getting to the money, your data, by themselves. It requires a second set of eyes, or in the case of Office, it may require your eyes to say yes. You can do that today through security workgroups. Same sort of idea. So if we're doing this directory federation, you can set up a series of security workgroups. You can say, hey, my Exchange admin can automatically elevate into the Exchange workgroup because that's their daily business, right? I want to go ahead and let that happen. But maybe they can't elevate into modifying DLP rules, right? They can just do basic stuff. Anytime I modify my DLP rules, because that is so impactful to my business, I always want 2 people to do it. Or, common scenario I ran into, I also did Ops IT for almost a decade. You are not normally the main admin for something, but you're the backup admin if the main person's out, right? And so what do you do in that scenario? Do you give me permissions to the things that I'm only a backup for all the time? Do you constantly turn up and turn down my permissions when that person's out? Is that going to cause latency issues or problems if I have to deal with an incident immediately? Well, in a just-in-time world, you can say, I have permissions, but it requires a second set of eyes to say yes. So I can elevate whenever needed, whenever this business case justifies it, but somebody else has to be in that approval chain. I can't do it myself, so we're really reducing that overall insider threat sort of concern. You can also say, hey, if you access PII or customer data or anything that I'm concerned about, you can do that. It's both available on-prem in Server 2016 and in Azure Active Directory Premium, which is in our commercial environment today and is coming in the government environment very, very soon. Do you have a question?
Yeah. So is that, I guess, one of the insider threat concerns that people might have with moving to the cloud is access to the key management system to Vault. Is that one of the mechanisms that you use internally for making sure that somebody who's got access to that is, permitted and it's audited?
Yep. So the question is, one of the biggest concerns is access to a service like Key Vault, which is coming up in my list here, control for keying material, right? So we would say keying material is absolutely something we should be concerned about, that is sensitive data unquestionably, because it allows me to bypass security features and potentially access customer data, even data that they believe is encrypted and offline for everybody else. Very, very sensitive. We would always require 2 keys if you're going to be able to extract something that you could then abuse. Right? So if this is going to grant you capabilities in an Office world, you can again make yourself the second key in that scenario. So absolutely, that's part of addressing the insider threat. We're going another level farther though in Azure when it comes to addressing insider threat, and that happens in the top part of the slide. That is, every action that we currently do, we don't do it like a normal admin where we sign in or even using PowerShell scripting and try to automate stuff. What we do is we have a bunch of predefined code called workflows. Their formal code has gone through SDL just like any other part of Windows or Office or anything else. And they do discrete actions, like my workflow might reboot a server, right? Or it might extract a piece of data. Or it might, in some cases, grant me interactive logon to the underlying operating system. We classify all of those as privileged or non. Every time we execute a privileged workflow, we have a team of engineers that looks at that and says, okay, well, what was the end result? Why did we need to do this in a privileged way? I'm going to write a new workflow that gets me to that same result without having to go through a privileged mechanism. Our target is 12 to 18 months. We want to be as close as possible to 0 humans having interactive access to a production environment. So the real way we're getting answer to your scenario is there just won't be any humans outside of incidents even capable of accessing it. What we're doing is changing a world where I have to trust a human to do the right thing because I've given them the capability to do more than is necessarily required, to I'm now actually only giving them access to a catalog of capabilities that are very discretely defined, right? It's my capability to achieve things. I'm doing it for a couple reasons. One, it's very, very expensive for me to screen, monitor, and train a large pool of people. I want that pool of people to be as small as possible. Only way I can do that is through automation or being able to remove most of these admins from privilege requirements because they can't touch customer data. The other reason is 85 to 90% of my threat landscape begins with humans. Most of it not malicious, right? We've already pretty well dealt with malicious through just-in-time. It's really that people are just bad at repeatable tasks. We'll get in, we'll make a tweak, we'll forget to put the firewall back up, we'll forget to do something. We will click on the wrong thing and we'll get phished or we'll get confused by an adversary. 90% of the threat vectors for our core adversaries come through this space. And it's one of these places where they're allowed to make small investments and they force me to cost myself a ton of money to combat it. We are willing, as Microsoft, to make the big engineering uplift to take that problem away. So if you think about it, everything your admins do today or might ever need to do, how long would it take you to turn that into software? We think that's 12 to 18 months for us, given our engineering expertise and our problem set and what we've already done over the last 5 years. Now, just like we made just-in-time a thing that you can use, we used it for ourselves a bit before, and then we said, this is great, let's turn it over to customers. You better believe once we get to this point where we're stable and happy, this is something that's coming available to customers. What you're going to see is our workflow engine will be available and published. You will be able to do workflows rather than just security groups through your just-in-time elevation. We will publish our catalog available so that you can use it. We will publish a scripting language so that you can use it, and we will curate an open source community around these, because the other thing that's important is we all need to remember that we're all in this together. Obscurity, hiding how we do things, is the opposite of security. Radical transparency is how I get to security, because I'd much rather have the people in this room pointing out my flaws than my adversaries finding them. Right? If I'm wrong, if I've not done something well, my solution is not to hide that. That's only ensuring that the advanced persistent threats, who realistically have more funding and more resources than even Microsoft, and I've got thousands of engineers and I'm spending $1 billion a year on this, even I am smaller than those organizations. Any federal agency is definitely smaller than those organizations, with the potential exception of the DoD. They're the #1 target organization. Microsoft is #2, following closely on their heels. And capabilities as a result. We need to be able to share information and work together as a community, because if we're in our silos, they're always going to win. But they don't have more resources and more intellectual capacity than all of us combined. Right? Once you start tipping the tables that way, once you start getting radically transparent, we are far in the lead. There's a lot more of us who want to be not criminals than people who want to be criminals in the world. And so we are also big believers in transparency, and part of why we want to publish this and make it available to you is not just that we're doing this the right thing for us, but you are all going to find problems that we haven't solved yet and make our own security better. At the same time, you're going to radically change your security. The biggest way the cloud does this is changing what the security plane is, the way that we think about our approach to security. So traditionally, or for the last 20 to 30 years, the network plane or boundary has been my security plane. What I do is I build walls and moats, and I build a castle, right? And then I put my data inside that castle and hope that it's all protected. And as a result, depending upon how valuable that data is, I have to build this really ridiculous castle every time. And I have to really control who has access, and it's now very difficult to share information within authorized communities. I have to replicate my castles a bunch of times if I have different levels of security and data, and it becomes very complicated. In the cloud-based world, using data loss prevention technologies, identity is my new plane. right? So we actually don't really care very much about the location-based stuff. In fact, I advocate when we do private sessions and engineering sessions with people is everything you're thinking about layer 3 down, OSI model, forget about it. Don't do it there. There's better places to do it. The only reason we did things at those layers is because for 20 to 30 years, that's the only thing you could guarantee would exist. Network was ubiquitous, therefore network was the security plane. But it's a really terrible security plane. You drown in useless data, you create single points of failure, you add latency, and that it was never architected to be meaningful, right? It's not designed as a security layer. There's lots of security designed in the upper layers. Because cloud is one set of infrastructure beginning to end, you can guarantee what's going to be there. You can do more intense and more meaningful monitoring up the stack. That's what we do for ourselves to keep ourselves from drowning. This is a fun little example, a couple of data points along these lines. If Office 365 were to store and maintain 90 days, and it has at various points to meet regulatory requirements, 90 days of NetFlow, that's 10x the volume of customer data in all of our clouds. How can we keep up with that? And certainly I can't maintain 9 years of data because there's just not enough storage to make that economical. But if I'm only keeping 90 days, my advanced persistent threats are perfectly happy to be on a 100-day cycle. And I'm just not going to see the repeating pattern. Right? So we have to get smarter about what we're monitoring so that we can have less data, not drown in it, but still keep it for a longer period of time. Now that being said, in Azure, we consume 7 trillion events a day that we process. So another example of with the hyperscale cloud and the security advantages that you get out of that. Imagine trying to build a SIEM that can manage and tolerate and deal with all of that amount of data flow. That's what we do for just Azure in our world, process and manage all of that using our advanced threat analytics. And we've actually gotten smart enough around threat analytics that we have our own intelligence organization internally that fingerprints and identifies these advanced persistent threats. We have our own internal code names like Helium. And we know the code mistakes that they make. They get sloppy too, just like anybody else does. And we can start fingerprinting things 0 days because we notice these common mistakes that are happening in codes, or they name processes all in the same sort of predictable manner, or they use the same set of passwords every single time in certain sets of code, and I can just find it immediately and block it out. And in fact, if you're a Windows customer, every 30 days we pump a release where we force the operating system to drop all of those things that we've detected, protect you automatically from all that. We do that in the cloud as well. I have digressed away from data loss prevention, though. There's too many cool things that I like to talk about. The advantage of data loss prevention is I really get to the world where I don't care where the information sits. I don't care if it's in my cloud, if it's in AWS, if it's on-prem, if it's on this laptop, if it's on this phone. I can protect it all the same. I don't have to care about the location of the information. I care about the location or the information itself. I do that by assigning tags. I classify and label all of my data. Then because that tagging engine is tied back into my rights permissioning engine, I can control the behavior of that tagged resource however I want to. So I can do things like, say, obvious things like who can access it, should it be encrypted, can it be sent to an external party. Then I can do less obvious things like cannot delete. I want to assign a legal hold flag. I can say, actually, once this flag is assigned, you cannot delete this file, even if you're authorized otherwise, because I might have legal action pending here. You can do things like say cannot copy, right? You can start to get really more fine-grained and say, I want to control, I don't want to have to create security groups around who control things, but I can tag something if I have multiple nation data. So I'm working with NATO as an example, and right, we have lots of militaries, they like to share data, where they want to try to share data, but they all tag and classify it differently. I can have the UK tag a file, or let's say the US military is going to tag a file as national security sensitive, but controlled unclassified information, NSS CUI, and then pass that over to the UK. Currently, they level that up to what they call privileged. But when they send it back to me, well, their privileged now ranks against as my secret. So data that was unclassified by just passing twice has become classified in my environment. I've created lots of problems. Instead, what I can do is just apply an NSS CUI flag to that data using DLP. If we're all part of a shared engine, they can then have their rules, their identity stack determine, or the shared identity stack determines what their users need to have in terms of privileges to be able to read that data. And I don't have to reclassify it. I don't have to retag it and approach it, and I can share information. Or let's say, for example, I have a bunch of data and some of it's PII, some of it's not PII. Some of my users are authorized to see PII, some are not. I can tag data to control who can access it, what can happen with it, must it be encrypted, but not have to restrict total availability and capability. It's a pretty radical change, and it's a big intellectual uplift, but it's a dramatically powerful thing to do. What it means is that we're going to be able to do two things. One, you're going to be able to get a lot more efficient with your data. Sharing data becomes easy. Two, you don't have to duplicate architecture. Example I like to give is, let's say we have a SharePoint site. It's got 2,000 daily users in it. They use it for their mission every single day. And then we do get sued, and there's a legal hold on some of the data in here. Now, depending upon my chain of custody events, either I have to move those files to a new location, so I'm duplicating architecture, or worse yet, if chain of custody won't allow me to move them, I have to lock all the rest of the users who need this data out from the entire thing, or move the rest of the data into a new location. So I'm, again, duplicating architecture. But in a DLP world, I just assign a legal hold flag. I can make it not erase. I can control who has access to it. I can make it not even visible in the SharePoint site. I didn't have to change anything. I didn't have to duplicate architecture. I didn't have to interrupt the way that all the rest of these users are operating, but I've achieved that level of security, which means the other thing we can do, and the other advantage of database security as opposed to, or data-tied security, because I don't want to make it sound like a database, data-tied security versus location-tied security, is that we tend to over-secure our information. We secure things up to whatever we think the highest level is, but we're probably not treating our most secure data at the appropriate level, as well as we should, because we've made it so difficult to interact with that we don't want to change, we have to walk this fine balance between how difficult is it to use versus how much do we want to protect it. In a DLP world, I can reduce the barrier to use pretty dramatically, which then allows me to scale up the barrier for those last few things that I really do care about and allow me to encrypt it. So let's give an example here. Using the rights management service and holder of key, there's some subset of data in my cloud, in your cloud instance, that you care really about, that you don't even want Microsoft to be able to read it, right? You want to encrypt it using a key that you own. You're going to store it in the cloud. You're fine with Key Vault and other things in general, but for this subset of data, it's so impactful, so meaningful, or so regulatory required, you don't want me to have access to it. So instead, you extend using our rights management tools on-prem, use a certificate authority that you have on-prem to do the keying material, so that we create a secure tunnel, we send the data to your on-prem rights management service, you encrypt it there, I don't get to see the key, it comes back up to the cloud, it's now encrypted, now nothing else can see it unless you bring it down and then put it back, right? So that whole bring it down, put it back thing has added a lot of cost, right? We don't want to do that all of the time, but there's certain pieces of data for which we should want to do it, and we probably don't do it currently in existing location-based architectures because it's just too cumbersome. DLP makes it easy. Yes, question in the back. Okay, so the question is, in the case of ransomware and you're using this type of strategy, how does the bringing it back and forth affect it? The answer is really going to be specific to how that individual piece of ransomware functions and how it's locked it. So in this scenario, what would have to happen for a ransomware to probably be effective is that ransomware would have to be in your on-prem architecture somewhere that it's capable of capturing that. If the ransomware were in fact on the overall infrastructure, it's less like, I mean, I guess the actual answer is that this is not going to have any effect on how ransomware functions one way or the other. It's going to be it's a different sort of strategy, and we'd have to look through your exact scenario to figure out how we protect against that. That's part of where our threat analytics and everything else that we're doing from an investment and security standpoint happens. But DLP is not really going to change that, because if they then encrypt your data and hold the key from you, that's still happened, right? The advantages of the cloud is if you do replication, we've got the 3 writes and the protectable geographic rewrite. Now they're having to steal, or they're having to encrypt multiple copies and prevent your access to it. It's going to be a lot harder to do a ransomware attack against the cloud than it is against an on-prem architecture, both around how we control access, the resources that are capable, and the things that you can do against our backend infrastructure are much more limited than you could do in a traditional architecture. But the DLP uniquely is not really going to have a specific effect there. Any other questions about DLP technology? I mean, I think the other thing that's really meaningful here, and the reason why I say this is a big intellectual uplift, in addition to a mindset change from location to data, it also requires you to put a lot of time and effort in developing a good data classification standard. You have to create something that is agile and scalable and usable. You don't want to create just 3 layers because you're going to overprotect data, but you also don't want to create 176 different categories because then your users will never be able to figure out how to use it, and they will start misapplying data. And probably that's one of the worst things you could have happen is you start radically misclassifying data. That's worse than not classifying it almost. And I kind of make it akin to the early days of database design. Databases are incredibly powerful, but if you don't design your schema well, that database immediately becomes a problem. You start overloading terms, you start misusing things, and it breaks. Your data classification hierarchy in a DLP world is going to be the same thing. And then you're also, when you're thinking about writing applications, so that session we did earlier, you need to start thinking about how am I going to use my application to use the DLP engines to affect this access sort of based security so that my application can take advantage of it. So when Office wrote all of its things around how email functions and SharePoint functions, they had to take this into account. You'll have to do the same thing from your perspective. Yeah?
I don't know if you forgive me if you mentioned already or not, maybe I lost your last statement. As far as the DLP is concerned, if you have DLP engine by somehow on the third party on the premises, how you can utilize or leverage the DLP on the Azure as far as the flow of the traffic? Let's say you have Office 365 as well. You want to get the PII back and forth to make sure you inform the client, okay, you have a PII. My question is, how are you going to leverage your DLP on Azure with the existing one?
Right. So the question is, if I already have my DLP engine, what do I do to deal with this now, right? Because what we're really describing is we have our own DLP engines that are running. We tied our DLP engines to our identity stack because identity is ubiquitous. It's the thing that touches everything. And so that's why we tied it there. It's going to become an interesting question of the ability to tie in, and it's going to be a one-off scenario that we'd have to do some deeper reviews as to whether or not whatever product you have on-prem and you're thinking about can then tie back in, or can we talk between the two or not. And the answer is in some cases it's going to be yes, and in some cases it's going to be no. It depends on how those things are architected, how open they are with their architecture. In general, we try to do open architecture everywhere we can. And so for example, our identity stack runs SAML 2.0. Anything that can speak to our identity stack. You can use things ubiquitously as a result. OMS, same sort of idea. We're trying to use standard open as much as possible. Our scripting language is standard open as much as possible. But DLP technologies, I can't guarantee that your third party is following that same philosophy.
The same as SharePoint.
Yeah.
SharePoint 2002, it has a 1.0, 2016.
Yeah. Well, so SharePoint 2002, that's more than 10 years ago. That was old Microsoft. That's a different company. And one more. I saw another question in the back, maybe, or I'm just getting blinded by the light. Revved up like a deuce, another roller in the night. Secrets management. So last thing I want to talk about. This is one of the last things I want to talk about. This is a big deal for maintenance of security in the cloud. In fact, I mean, these are literally the keys to the kingdom. How do you maintain them? How do you deal with them? We designed an internal service that we call Secret Store because there's no way we could manage our fleet by having admins log into a traditional password book and check credentials in and out. That's just not going to work at our scale. It's not possible. So instead, we designed some software that was going to create a vault that would do all of that for us and not show us what it was doing, which is the magic of Secret Store. That became Key Vault. So just like we did just in time, we started with us, we made it available to you. We're doing the same thing here. We have Secret Store internally. It's Key Vault. It's available for you. The vault is software. That software stores your keys. It's backed up by HSMs. So when you create keying material, there is a physical HSM that sits behind it. It can do that, but you can store any secret in there. So you can load your own keys in there if you wanted to. You can load, we do service account credentials in there, things that we treat more like secrets. You could do symmetric encryption keys, anything that you wanted to do, any sort of secret that you want to store, you can load in there. The value is the humans don't have to touch it, and your code doesn't have to touch it. Instead, what you do is you make an API call, or your app makes an API call to the vault. Say it initially wants to create some PKI. Makes an API call to the vault and says, hey, I need some PKI. And the vault says, no problem. It creates it using the HSM, gives me an API back that I can then use to call that crypto, but it doesn't show me the key. I don't get to know what the key is. I don't get to know what that material is. Then I can set up my app to then say, okay, I'm going to use that key that I created. I'm going to open a session. I'm going to transfer some data over to the vault. The vault's going to encrypt it, and then we're going to write it secure at rest over here, so I don't ever get to see it, right? So in that scenario, my application can be compromised. An adversary could take over my application. They never see the keying material, which means they're not going to be able to decrypt this encrypted at rest data because they don't have access to it. The only thing they're going to be able to do is try to pull it all back live through the application. Right? So I'm going to try to do that. We have solutions coming, they're probably 5 years out, that will fix even that. If anybody's familiar with secure enclaves and some of Intel's papers along those lines, we can have chats afterward about how that's fun and exciting. But not for today because it's a bit down the road. But in general, what we're saying is they don't have access to it. Same idea for service accounts. Right now, if you compromise my app and my app knows what that service account is because I've put it into code or it actually logs in as it, in some way, shape, or form, then the adversary can try to log in as that service. Now, good hygiene practice is to make all service accounts non-human interactable, but we forget from time to time. Admins make mistakes. We flag it on for a minute and forget to turn it back off. These are all common problems that happen. And so an adversary might try to use that. They've compromised my app. They have limited privileges. They use this service account to now gain a lot more privileges than they previously had, and then replicate that out until they have everything that they need. Right? So if they can't see the credentials, they can only request through the vault that a session be created for them. They can't actually now try to break out of context. It's much more difficult for them to take over and take advantage. The last thing I wanted to talk about was our big threat analytics, or second to last thing I want to talk about, our big threat analytics and where we're moving from that perspective. We already kind of got there with the talk about our threats typing and things. You can get this coming soon in the government environment. It's Azure Security Center. You can get this threat analytics. We're actually moving to integrate this all into OMS. OMS is fully available in the government environment, where you're going to get our threat analytics, the stuff that we're doing against our fabric layer, where we're watching for attacks against our infrastructure, available for you for your own subscriptions, and then available to your things that aren't even in Azure. So you can get all that threat telemetry. You can start seeing, hey, is this helium banging on my front door? Get all that same data, part of the things that Microsoft is doing. The last thing I wanted to get to, because I did mention philosophy a little bit, and some of this is charted trending. We have an overall philosophy that we call achieving parity, or that I call achieving parity, I'm forcing inside. The general theory there is that we should treat all cybersecurity like a distributed denial of service attack. If you think about early days of denial of service, we would have this problem where you could make a ping, you send me very small resource requests, and I would do a bunch of things as a result, right? And so we ended up having to shift our code around. And at first, that was not that big a deal because I had more infrastructure than my adversaries. They needed to get a bunch of infrastructure. They could try to ping me to death, and so I just made my code a little bit better so that there wasn't as much in parity. Well, then botnets happened, and all of a sudden, whoops, our infrastructures are the same, or their infrastructure is bigger. And so now I had to get a lot better about my code. And so we're at a point now where when any resource that you have to do to spend, any resource I have to spend as a processing, you have to spend as a request for that processing, is effectively good denial of service design. We want to do the exact same thing for everywhere else in cybersecurity. Because right now we have this asymmetric problem. Our adversaries can make small investments, and I spend $1 billion a year. That's a problem. It is not sustainable, especially when the Russian diaspora and nation states have hundreds of millions of dollars to spend. We're not in a sustainable war there. It's why for the last probably 10 to 15 years we've been in a tactical catch-up game. We're playing chess. We have to win every single time. One of the big ways we're making an investment here is around that idea of changing the identity stack and changing how you get access and removing humans from the equation. Because now in our world through workflows, if we end up with a catalog of say 10,000 workflows, I haven't solved the problem completely, right? Because I still have to be right 10,000 times. The code of those workflows has to be good. The interaction among them has to be good. But I've shifted from an infinite space to a contained space. So I have to be right 10,000 times. They can only be right 10,000 times, right? I've limited the capability. We're now approaching parity of investment. We still both have to pay attention, but I've limited the scope. I've said, hey, actually, you guys like fighting over here. This is where you're doing, this is where you want. No, you have to come to me. You can still attack me, but you have to come to me. You have to do it on my terms. We want to become strategic not tactical. We're using the power of the cloud, the power of our problem space managing this size of infrastructure, and the engineering might of the largest software company on the planet to do some pretty significant investments. We did that around monitoring. We're doing it around access. We're looking at every place where we're seeing common vectors that allow our adversaries to make small investments, and we currently spend in big investments. And we're deciding that, the reason I joined Microsoft, I switched away from being a consultant a year and a half ago, was to use that power to make a dramatic change. And we think this is really the approach. This is the difference. We want to think about all of cybersecurity like it's distributed denial of service. We want to do the same push that we did for that technology in everything that we do, so that we can get strategically ahead of the curve for the first time, and then do our best to stay there, and then on top of that, be radically transparent about exactly how we're doing it, so that we have, for the first time in about 5 to 10 years, a resource advantage once again. Right, so we make it equal resources, and then I, once again, have more resources than they do. It becomes a lot harder for us to become compromised. I want to save the rest of the time. We probably have, I think we have 10 minutes left officially for questions, and then I'll be around the rest of the day and tomorrow for anybody who wants to follow up. Go ahead.
You've mentioned several times removing humans from the equation, basically, and I'm just wondering, do you have something against what I do for a living? Or?
No, absolutely not. So, and we still have admins as well, right? So the admins have to be there. The difference is the admins, I don't want the admins in and out. I did Ops IT for 9 years. I feel your pain. Let me put it.
I have an answer for you, both of you.
And I'm going to say, I have the next level of answer as well. So, because I hear this a lot from CIOs who are concerned about, hey, they're either excited, they're like, my move to my cloud means I can fire my whole IT team, right? And we're like, no. Or the move to the cloud means I'm going to lose my whole IT team. No. The difference is you go from keeping the lights on to providing mission-based value. Your job gets better and more interesting because you move from ops to DevOps, and DevOps is more fun. I promise you, it's more interesting. You get to do a better job. And honestly, it's one of these things where we're wasting a lot of potential intellectual capacity. My grandparents are farmers. I grew up in Kansas doing farming. Before the Green Revolution, 2/3 of the population in the United States was farming. That was a lot of wasted intellectual capacity. We're doing the same thing here. The cloud is the capability to allow everyone to focus more back on their core mission, including your internal IT staff. They can now think about, how can I make the business better, not just how do I make sure that people aren't screaming because they can't check their email. Right? Those are different worlds. Those are different value propositions. If anything, it makes IT more valuable to an internal organization because you are now tied as a productive part of the mission, not a necessary expense. I have to tell you, I hated being the necessary expense. I felt like I was the technical janitor, right? Yeah, you don't want to be in that world. You want to be in the world that's producing something, right? That's how you get there through the cloud, by taking your eye off the ball that other companies do well for you and focusing your stuff back on the core mission of your organization that you're going to do better than we will, which is why we're not doing some other things like developing enterprise healthcare solution, or apparently we're not doing desktop in the cloud. Next. Oh, one way in the back, under the light. Right, so the question is, have I not seen any of the Terminator movies? There is still a human in our equation, right? We're not talking about using cognitive services or AI to do this. This is not self-healing. It is we're really using software as a middle layer to change the threat landscape. We're changing threat surface.
So we're not going to see like the Skynet reborn or something?
Right. So we're going to see Skynet reborn. We have no intention of designing Skynet. I'm not in Microsoft research. I don't know what they're really thinking along these lines. But we don't. No, the AI is all of the AI tools anywhere on the planet. We're a long way away from anything like that. Still the biggest threat. Maybe. All right. Well, thank you. You have been a wonderful audience. I appreciate it.